Welcome to my channel. My name is Antonio Gervasoni. I'm a Peruvian composer and university professor, and this is the fourth video in my series on music composition, which aims to introduce you to some key aspects of this wonderful art. In this video, I'll talk about the concepts of tension and release and how they apply to music composition. Like any art form that develops over time, music tends to organize itself as a succession of waves. In an analogy with sound waves, music seems to go from a crest to a trough, then to a crest again, and then to another trough, and so on. This is how we get the feeling that music has some kind of movement. It seems that it's in motion, that it's progressing. Of course, some types of music can be more static or active than others. It's possible to write a sustained chord with no variations of any kind in its sound, and it could still be called music, giving the impression of being suspended in time, but a composer is highly unlikely to present such a thing to an audience. These waves are also probably what makes us feel as if the music is narrating a series of events or telling some kind of story, and they can be found at all levels of a piece, from its structure, the macro level, to the notes themselves, the micro level. The terms tension and release can be used to describe this way of interpreting the musical phenomenon. These concepts can be applied to the design of the structure of a work, the top level, in particular through variations of character. A very active section or movement is usually followed by a calmer one. It's very rare that the same character is repeated in succession, although it's not unthinkable. You can hear this in any multi-movement piece, like a piano concerto. Most concertos have a three-movement scheme in which the second movement is almost always slow and peaceful, while the other two are more active. These character variations also occur within a movement itself, and again contribute to the feeling that the music is in motion, is progressing, and that it seems to be saying something. The concepts of motion and rest seem to be related to the things I just mentioned, and in many cases they can be, but not always. A piece of music that suggests the idea of movement can feel both tense and relaxed, and the same can be said of pieces that suggest the idea of rest. However, composers think about these concepts during the writing process, because there are several ways to suggest tension and relaxation, and they work differently depending on the degree of motion or rest that the music is supposed to be communicating. Sometimes music also gives the impression of moving in a certain direction. It seems to be trying to reach some goal, which is typically known in music theory as a climax. A climax is a point where the music undergoes some kind of noticeable change, sometimes quite dramatic. It usually goes from tension to release, a process known as resolution, but it can be the other way around. The word climax generally implies a peak of some kind, a point of maximum energy. Because of this, composers also use the term anticlimax to refer to a goal that represents a point of lower energy. In film music, a climax can coincide with a change in the image. This is known as a hit point, and is done to emphasize a particular event in the narrative. Almost everyone agrees that some notes sound good when played together, and others don't. Conventionally, when the former occurs, we say we hear a consonance. And when the latter occurs, we call it a dissonance. It's mostly linked to issues of style and tradition, which vary from culture to culture, but it's also related to the way we perceive sound. All people, musicians or not, are able to appreciate this phenomenon without any effort. Generally speaking, consonance sounds pleasant to us, while dissonance makes us feel uneasy. The explanation for this is both cultural and physiological, and I must point out that they are neither universal nor static. They change from one culture to another and from one era to another. In music theory, dissonance is equated with tension and consonance with release, and when we go from the first to the last, we say that a resolution has occurred. In other words, the problem, the dissonance, has been resolved. The alternation between these two states is what gives music a sense of motion on the plane of harmony. However, I must also point out that there are degrees of consonance and dissonance. That is, some consonances feel more pleasant than others, and some dissonances feel more disturbing than others. This means that it's possible to create a piece with just one of them, and in fact there are examples of this. The term harmonic rhythm refers to the speed at which the harmony within the music changes. Compare, for example, a piece in which the harmony changes in every measure with a piece in which it changes twice in every measure. The harmonic rhythm is then twice as fast in the second case. Of course, rhythm doesn't have to be so uniform. Changes can occur in a more irregular way. Harmonic rhythm can also be related to the concepts of tension and release. For example, one piece may have a very consonant chord sequence, while another alternates between consonant and dissonant chords, and yet another may feature only dissonant chords. The former would feel perhaps a bit static, the second would suggest movement, and the third would keep us in a constant state of expectation from a harmonic point of view. From another perspective, we must also consider the changes themselves. If two chords, whether consonant or dissonant, share common tones, the change from one to the other will be perceived as softer or weaker. If the opposite happens, the change will feel stronger, harsher. The latter may create some tension while the former will most likely feel relaxed. Finally, we come to the level of the notes. In tonal music, it is said that the notes have an impulse of their own, as if they had a tendency to move in a certain direction. The seventh note of a major scale, known as the leading tone, has a tendency to move upward and resolve into the tonic. We sense some kind of tension when this note appears, and we expect it's released. For the same reason, the second note wants to move down, also to the tonic. And when combined with the seventh, the fourth note tends to want to move down to the third. The fifth note wants to jump, mainly up, to the tonic, while the sixth note, well, doesn't seem to want to move in any direction, as does the third. All this is cultural in origin. Sounds don't have any kind of impulse of their own. It's our expectation that makes us wait for them to move in a certain direction. But cultural or not, they do have impulse, at least within the context of tonal music, and this is again related to the concepts of tension and release. Tension and release are just words that help us define what we feel when we hear certain musical sounds. There's no real tension that needs to be released, not from a physical point of view. All of this is related to our perception, not to the sounds themselves. Nevertheless, composers do use these concepts to give variety to the speed of the musical discourse in a piece. Thank you for watching this video, and subscribe to be notified when I post a new one. I give private lessons online on composition. If you want to know more, click on the linked video or visit my website. The link is in the description below.